Rainbow Reflections, Book 1, A Kind of Magic. Chapter 8, Lost Opportunity. Sarala wanted to pummel Zin the next morning as her wake-up call rang through the tower yet again. Why did that girl have to be so annoying? She groaned and got to her feet, throwing the soft blankets off her and stomping loudly to the door. "Shut up!" she growled fiercely. "No!" Zin replied. Sarala crossed her arms over her chest angrily. "Why do you even bother?" "I always greet the spirits in nature each day." Sarala snorted at that. "Spirits? Really? Spirits don't exist. And even if they did, I'm sure they're not deaf, so stop your screaming." Zin made no response, so Sarala clambered back into her bed. She had just pulled the blanket back over her head and closed her eyes when the bell rang loudly through the school. She sighed and got to her feet, figuring there was no point in missing breakfast just to sleep in a bit. "Why does breakfast have to be so early?" she complained as she entered the family room minutes later. Zin and Ren were already there. Zin was dressed in a green robe with golden flowers, and Ren wore a simple blue robe and sweatpants. "Because there are classes to be had," Ren pointed out. "If we had breakfast later, we'd have to have lunch at 1. Who eats lunch at 1? "Yeah, I'd rather eat lunch at 11, Zin commented. Ren rolled her eyes. "Come on, let's go." "So we're doing that homework today, right?" Sarala asked as they made their way across the cool courtyard, the sky cloudy above. Ren nodded eagerly. "I can't wait to plot out my birth chart. I mean, I've looked it up on the internet plenty of times before, but..." Sarala stared at her. "Wait, Mr. Jihan said we can use the airnet to help us, right? So can't we just find the whole chart and copy it down?" Zin shrugged, opening the door to the eating hall, the smell of burnt toast hitting their noses at once. "I don't think he means we could completely take it. That'd be plagiarism after all. But we can definitely use it to help us out." Sarala frowned as they made their way over to a semi-lawn line. "I don't have a mirror, though. I don't even know much about AirNet." "You can just borrow our mirror," Ren told her. "Zin and I already share the family mirror." She huffed in annoyance at the thought of having to rely on others, then reached for a blueberry muffin as the line moved. The three soon had their trays loaded with food and went to a table. They ate with small talk, then finished and set their dirty trays on the trash can by the door. They exited the eating hall as the bell sounded for the second years to get to their first class. Ignoring this, Sarala and Zin trailed the skipping Ren to the library. "I thought we were going to get our charts off the AirNet," Sarala asked. "Shush!" Zin hissed back. The library was vast, with red-painted walls that were mostly covered by bookshelves. There were aisles upon aisles of shelves, some squished together that there was little space to move between the hundreds of books. Right upon entering, there were a few tables and chairs, which allowed students to do their work. However, even the tables were so close together in the cramped space. Windows lined the back wall, allowing Sarala to see specks of dust floating in the light streaming through. "What are we in here for?" Sarala grumbled. "Let's just get the charts off the AirNet." "But then you're not learning anything, silly," Ren replied. "I don't want to learn it," Sarala muttered. Ren ignored her and went up to a large desk off to the side, which was practically pushed against the shelf. Leaning against this desk was a blond man in a pink floral dress. He glanced over at them as they approached, his orange eyes lighting up.
"Ren! Zin!"
He greeted them, smiling. Sarala huffed lightly in annoyance. It was as if she didn't exist. "But it's not like I even know that guy," she reminded herself. "Why would he bother greeting me?" "Hey, Aster," Zin said. "That's Mr. Sundale to you kids," Aster said in a pretend stern voice. "What can I do for you?" "We need to figure out our birth charts," Ren told him. "Can you help us?" Aster's eyes seemed to light up even more. He clapped his hands together and nodded several times. Of course. I'd be delighted to help. I love doing birth charts and astrology." Ren winked over her shoulder at Sarala. Sarala scowled in return. She had half a mind to turn and walk out from the library. Ren seemed to sense this and asked, Can we start with Sorala's chart? Aster nodded, grabbing several pieces of paper from inside the desk. He then rummaged in the drawers, making a lot of rattling noises until he pulled out several books on astrology and birth charts. What's your birthday, place of birth, and time of birth? Aster asked, glancing up at her as he crouched over a book. Sorala stiffened. Is this a trick? Are they trying to find out more about my background? She wondered. April 6, 39 JE, she muttered. Aster scrawled out across the top of one sheet of paper, then asked, Place and time of birth? I don't know, she said flatly. Aster blinked up at her. You have to know, otherwise we can't do this birth chart for you. The place of birth determines how the planets were lined up according to your location on Sator, and I guess I'll be failing this assignment then, Sorala uttered, crossing her arms over her chest. Didn't Mr. Jihan say we only needed to chart the sun and moon sign anyway? And what's Sator? The others stared at her. Then Aster said, Sator is our planet? Sorala blushed. How was I supposed to know that? Yeah, I think that's what Khurshid said about what we needed to chart, Zin replied after a small moment of silence. Charting a full birth chart on your own? That'd take weeks or months. Ren flicked her sister. It would not. Yeah, it would. Girls, calm down, Aster said with a sigh. He looked over at Sorala. Well, we know your sun sign is in alignment with fire. Is that your elemental magic? Sorala shook her head. I have earth. So you were born at night with a moon in the earth sign, Aster said simply. There are only 3 signs that represent earth, so we would just need to figure out what that would be. He opened one of his books and handed it to her. This book tells you the combination of your astrological sun and moon signs. See here? That's your sun sign. This page is one of the moon signs in Earth combined with that fire sun sign. Read all of the moon signs in Earth and choose whichever one fits your personality best. Sorala read the first description of a fire sun sign with an earth moon sign. She frowned and went to the next passage. That's an air sign next, Ren told her, pointing at the title of the section. And the next one is water, and the one after that is fire. There's the second earth sign. Sorala read the next passage, feeling confused over these different signs. All she knew was that there were 12 astrological signs that were associated with a particular element. She had no idea what they were called, or why she'd need to know anything about them. The second passage sounded a bit like her personality, though, so she told Aster, who wrote it down. We still can't figure out the exact placement in finding when the moon was in this Earth sign during that particular year will be a bit tricky, Aster told her. But I'll figure out something worthy enough for your birth chart. Sorala didn't care. They spent the whole day in the library, taking a break for lunch and returning soon after. Aster only had to leave once to help a student find a book, but otherwise remained with them. As it was only the second day of school, most of the students didn't need the library just yet. Sorala's birth chart took the longest as they had to figure out the moon's position. Zin, who had a fire sun sign and an air moon sign, also didn't know her exact birthplace, but was able to get her chart made sooner due to knowing the exact signs and time of her birth. Ren, who also knew her information, only took a long time to get through because she wanted to know the placement for all of the other planets. At this point, Sorala decided to leave, getting a headache from being cooped up in a dusty room and having a hard time reading. She went to the courtyard for a breath of fresh air. It was almost dinner time, and the bell would be ringing soon. She would head to the eating hall in a bit, so she wouldn't be stuck at the end of a long line. That's when something caught her eye. Frowning, her body tensed. She tiptoed towards the northern garden, where she had seen the small movement. Though she hadn't seen it fully, the movement did not seem to be human. It's probably just a bird, she thought to herself. She had seen plenty of bird movements during her time in the wild, which would always frighten her. She often mistook the birds as some sort of monster lurking in the bushes, stalking her. Most times it had just been birds or perhaps a squirrel. It's definitely just a bird. But Sorella relied a lot on instinct, and even though she knew it was just a bird and that she was safe at the school, she still had to check it out. Therefore, she crept forward until reaching the garden. Her heart beat louder in her ears as she approached the undergrowth where she'd seen the movement. There was nothing there. Sorella scanned the bushes and trees for several long moments, her ears pricked and her whole body on alert. Yet she couldn't sense anything. She couldn't even detect any danger. She allowed her body to relax. Just a bird. I knew it, she thought irritably. However, as she turned her back on the garden, she felt that she had missed something. She frowned and looked over her shoulder, as if expecting the bird to suddenly appear. The garden was still empty. Calm down, she scolded herself. You're too jumpy. She shook herself and headed for the eating hall. Uncertain why she'd sensed something was wrong, she just knew she'd feel much better inside. She had hardly taken 2 steps when she felt like she was being watched. Sorella swiveled swiftly on the spot, staring at the trees once more. There! She saw the bushes move, though there was no wind to stir them, the cloud-scudded sky as still as the buildings below it. Rushing to the plants, she did not care if her footsteps were loud on the stone. She was out in the open after all, and whatever had been watching her would surely know that she'd seen it. The bell rang, and as students started streaming into the courtyard from all around the school, Sorella vanished into the prickly bushes. She shifted leaves aside, her gold eyes scanning the darkest areas of the garden. As it was only August, the sun still stayed out in the evening, providing her with enough light to see by. But she still saw nothing. After searching the entire garden for the next 10 minutes, totally forgetting about dinner, she decided to give up. She sensed that whatever had been watching her before was now gone. Sighing and stumbling out of the garden, she suddenly saw a small object on the ground, catching the rays of soft sunlight, managing to poke through the clouds. Sorella bent down to pick it up. It was a mirror shard. She frowned as she inspected it, but there was nothing sinister about it. It was literally just a broken piece of glass. Not knowing what to do with it, she put it in her robe pocket and remembered about dinner. She hurried to the eating hall and sighed in annoyance as she saw the long line upon entering the loud space. Before she could make her way to the end of the line, she felt a tugging on her arm. Whirling around, her fist ready to punch her attacker, she barely managed to stop herself in time. Whoa, don't hit me! It's me, Ren! Why'd you sneak up on me? Sorella sneered, dropping her fist. I didn't sneak up on you. Didn't you hear me calling your name? Ren asked, her hands held up in front of her to protect herself. No, Sorella said bluntly. What do you want? I was just asking you where you were. We didn't see you when we came in, Ren pointed out, lowering her arms. I didn't realize I had to tell you my every movement, Sorella uttered, glaring at the girl. Ren bit her bottom lip, looking worried. I was just in the garden, Sorella went on. But why'd you come late to dinner? Didn't you hear the bell? Zin asked, walking over from the table she had been sitting at paces away. Sorella glared at her. Obviously. Then why are you late? Zin pressed. I can't tell them what I saw. They'll think I'm crazy. But then again, who or what would just show up and drop a mirror shard? Maybe I should tell them. What if this is some sort of security issue? Sorella? She snapped her gaze to Ren, then looked around the eating hall. There were too many people nearby. She grabbed Ren's arm and pulled her outside, where they were less likely to be overheard. Zin trailed after them curiously. What is it? Ren asked, once the door to the eating hall closed behind them. I saw something in the garden, Sorella told her in a low voice. Well, I didn't see anything, but it felt like I was being watched. I went to look, but whatever it was left. Oh, that's probably one of Dad's frog oils, Zin said, chuckling. They usually just stay still and sit on the walls high up, or stay in certain areas like counseling. They only turn on if they detect movement, like when you showed up and it alerted Dad, since there's some outside the school too. Sorella frowned, remembering how the statue's eyes lit up violet when she had approached the school. Those things are creepy. Zin shrugged in response. Do you think it was a froggoyle you saw? Ren asked Sorella. She thought about that for a long moment, then shook her head. It didn't move like stone? I thought it was a bird since it was so fast, and it wasn't low to the ground, but in the air. That doesn't sound like a froggoyle, Ren commented. It could be if it was jumping, Zin objected. Well, would a froggoyle drop this? Sorella asked, pulling out the mirror shard. The sisters stared at it blankly. Then Ren queried, How do you know it dropped this? What else would drop it in the garden? Sorella grumbled. A student? If they broke their mirror by mistake, then yes, Zin said. Sorella sighed. Should I tell your dad? She grunted. Zin shrugged. If you want to, but if something weird got in the school, the froggoyles would have told Dad already. Where would he be? Sorella asked. Having dinner, like the rest of us, Ren said. Come on. She led the way in the opposite direction from the eating hall, towards the northern wall. They went through the door next to the Kung Fu studio, which was labeled as the art studio. This room was long and smelled of paper and paint. A few wooden desks sat in the front of the class, and large canvas stands stood at the back. Hyaktu was currently standing in front of one, a plate of food on a table beside him as he painted on a canvas. He glanced up at them as they entered. What are you three up to? He inquired. Sorella has something to tell you, Ren said. Sorella quickly recounted her story. Hyaktu seemed a lot more concerned about it than Ren and Zin, but did not interrupt. He took the mirror shard from her and inspected it closely. Finally, he spoke. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, he said seriously. I will check in with the froggoyles and with Khurshid. Do you know what might have dropped this, then? Sorella asked curiously. Hyaktu pursed his lips, then murmured mysteriously, I have ideas. He shook his head. Make sure you get some dinner. If you see anything else, be sure to alert me. And if you come across any more objects, do not pick them up. Sorella frowned, narrowing her eyes in suspicion. What's with that mirror shard? Am I not safe here either?